Hello, everybody. My name is Sean Terry, and I was asked to come on to this next video about the GDE to kind of talk about it from a person who, excuse me, from a person who is using it to program a game project. I think it is quite remarkable for what it can do. And things with it are changing. You know, it's getting better and better due to things I've suggested as well as others that have used it. But it's a wonderful program that lets you program essentially. Um, Now, you the really cool thing about this one is if you know a programming language, if you know the intricacies of programming, like if statements, you know, where they should be, how many of them there should be, equally the end of statements, where they are, and how many of those should be there in the same uh, action list, if you will. You know, if you understand where to put left and right parentheses, if you understand where to put left and right brackets, if you understand where to put certain punctuations, if you understand about strings and the differences between variables like local, global, and constant, and I'm sure there are other ones out there. Excuse me, I'm sorry. My throat is not as good as I'd want it to be, but I really wanted to get this out there. So, anyways, back to what I'm saying. If you understand those things, then programming is going to be a breeze for you. If you also understand the whole mathematical aspect of changing values from one thing to another, um, programming with a programming language such as the language that GDE was actually programmed in, which is C sharp. Then you'd be just fine. But for someone like me that doesn't know how to program, you know, well, I wouldn't say doesn't now, because I've used GDE for a while. I've used it ever since I heard about it. I think I heard about it on audiogames.net. The developer of the Sonus console had come on the forum, and I think he had put something up saying, you know, hey, this is a program I've written for those that don't know how to program or want to make programming easier. Try it out. Let me know what you think. I was really, really enthralled. My mind was like, wait, what? No way. Because I've always wanted to make my own audio games. And, well, now because of that, I can. When I got the program, I I didn't quite understand how things work. So I contacted the developer, and uh, he's been kind of helping me here and there and saying, okay, this is this and this is where it should be, because what GDE is, essentially, it is a program where in when you open it, you kind of have this. Well, if you kind of tab through it, it looks like an empty slate, like an empty project, but it's not. You have your X, Y, and Z edit boxes, which is where on a grid, both up, down, meaning forward and back, left and right, and then up and down from the ceiling to the floor, where is this object going to be placed? And then the next three tabs are the same thing, X, Y, and Z, but before that it's B as in Bravo, meaning like the boundary, if you will. So the first three are where is this object going to be placed. The second three is how big around is this object going to be from the center point of where it was sat at. So say you put an object at X30 and Z30. And okay, so right there, it's only just this one little square. It's X30 and Z30, and that's it. So if you use the B, X, Y, and Z's, if you say that you want the BX, meaning how long is it going to be from left to right. So remember, we have X30. So if we said BX2, what's going to happen is the BX is going to be 2 spaces to the left and right of the X where it was originally placed. So it would go down to 28 and go up to 32. So essentially it would be 5 spaces from left to right. 30 being the centerpiece and 2 spaces on either side making up the entire BX. Now the same thing with the BZ. If you said you wanted the BZ to be 2 from to the, if you look at it like a piece of paper, like top down, kind of like Swamp. If any of you guys have played Swamp, I'm sure you have, but so it's like a flat piece of paper. So your Z is going to the top, from the top to the bottom of the piece of paper, and your X is going from the left of the piece of paper to the right. Your Y is raising up in the air from the piece of paper and going back down to the piece of paper. So if you wanted your Z to be 2 spaces from the top of the piece of paper to the bottom, but on either side of the X30 that we had said before, then that means that your Z, remember your Z30 as well. Your Z30 is going to be 2 spaces, so it's going to go from Z30 to Z32 from the point of the center to the top of the piece of paper, and from Z30 to Z28 from the same point, the centerpiece and the top of the piece. The bottom of the piece of paper. Sorry. So there, essentially, you have an X because you have made a wall that goes from 28 to 32 from top to bottom, and from 28 to 32 from left to right. And if you left the Z alone, the Y, sorry, if you left the Y alone, then it would just be a flat X. Nothing any bigger than a piece of paper, if you will. It's not it's not like an actual box. It doesn't have sides to it, if you will. So, after that, you have, after those edit boxes, you have, and you're going to find this on any object creation. Any object creation that you do, you'll find all of these boxes and further things that I say. There's the loop audio checkbox, which does exactly what it says. The audio that is placed on the object, especially in the object's creation, it will loop that audio. Now, you can also loop audio within the periodical as well, but you can set the delay of when the loop should happen, which is pretty nice. So that's my. Now wait a minute. Did I skip delay? I may have. I'm going to turn on my screen reader.
Speech mode talk.
So that
Studio record 1. Sonus GDE V2. Sonus G.
We can go through this together. I want to show you really quick so I don't get myself confused.
Add action.
Alright, that's add action.
BX colon.
Okay.
Selected
so
0.
I talked about the XYZ BX BY and BZ. So
BZ colon. Delay colon. Selected 0.
okay, delay. That's what I was talking about. Delay is only used for the periodical event. And essentially what happens is, if you put a delay of, say, 0.25, then what's going to happen is whatever happens in the game is going to happen 25 seconds, or 25 seconds. What am I saying? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, God. I'll have to cut that out. It's going to happen in 1/4 of a second. 0 being 0 seconds, and 0.25 being the 1/4 of a second. So, say we have a spider in a game, or any kind of an enemy in a game, and you want them to follow the player, or search for and find the player object. If you set it to 0, then basically, once you have everything set up correctly, which the developer of the GDE is actually going to go into further details on a project to explain these kind of things, which he kind of has explained before in a video beforehand, that if you have an enemy that's coming after you, but you put the delay at 0, then the enemy is not going to be coming after you. The enemy is going to be placed at its particular location at creation and then instantly jump to your location. Instantly. And no matter what happens, when you walk around, the enemy will be walking with you, if you will. Because there is no delay. There is no time in which the enemy has to walk towards you. So if you use that point, the sample I said earlier, the 0.25, and you put that on the enemy's object, and you set up some actions to make the enemy look for your X and Z locations and find where you are. If the enemy is at a higher X or Z or lower X or Z than the player object is, then it's going to realize that and say, hey, I need to go in this direction to find the player and do something if you have it set to that. So if you have the 0.25 delay set, that means it's going to take a second for the enemy to walk 4 coordinates. So from, say, we'll use the X30 again. So it would take 1 second for the enemy to walk from X30 to X26, or yeah, because 29, 28, 27, 26, 4. So enough on delays.
Loop audio not checked.
Alright, there's our loop audio not checked. If you check it, the audio will, once its audio is finished, you don't have to put anything after the audio is done to loop it or do anything with it. It will see that the file has finished playing and restart the file. This is good for ambient background or noises when an enemy is idle. It'll play a looped sound. It's also good for objects that somebody needs to find and pick up and put in their inventory, because you can loop the sound. Okay,
Variables.
now variables. In my opinion, because I was asked to tell my thoughts of GDE as well, so I'm going to just state my opinion as well. I think here, just for better understanding for new users, the option should say local variables, because there are also global variables. They're in the edit menu, and it does say global variables in the edit menu. This here, I feel, should say local variables. Now that I understand things better, and it says variables, it is understandable that it would just say variables because it's on an object. So any variable that is put in this system right here, this variables area, is going to be a local variable because it's pertaining to the particular object that you're working on. So maybe what we could do is have a setting in GDE with a checkbox that says something like verbose mode, um, so that people can understand, like where it says delay here.
Loop delay colon. Select.
You know, uh, I feel that it should say for beginners periodical delay, so that you understand that the delay has to do with the periodical event of the object and the periodical event only. Um, because you might think that it has to do with uh, collision or maybe creation, um, something like that. Maybe audio finished. I don't know. So again, the verbose mode, I think, would maybe make a bit more sense in this aspect for newcomers to the program.
Loop variables. Used events. Creation not
Now,
selected.
used events. These are the events that were used, that you have put actions in, so that you have made them usable. Now, here's another thing that I'm hoping can be fixed. See, I'm at the top, and it says creation not selected. I'm going to press down arrow.
Creation not selected.
It says that it's not selected yet again. I press down arrow one more time.
Creation.
Okay, now it's selected. Now if I have more than just creation, it will go to the next used event.
Up press not selected.
Up pressed. Now, if there are more, it should go to the next used event. But unfortunately,
Creation not selected.
it even says it's not selected anymore.
Creation. Up press not selected.
See, now it says up pressed is not selected.
Creation not selected.
So I think there might be a little bug in this area. Now, you can, however, use first letter navigation on this used events list.
Audio finished not selected.
See, I pressed A and I went to audio finished.
Up press not selected. Up pressed.
Now, what's interesting is even though it says not selected,
Audio finished not selected.
I can then tab and go into the actual event that I am on. So it is selected even though it says it's not. So just a couple of things to look on there, Mr. Developer of the Sonus. So let's go
Creation not
back
selected.
to creation. Our next tab,
Event colon. Creation collapsed.
well, pressing tab. Now, events. These are stationary. They do not change, they do not move. These are the events you're going to use in order to put actions in. And they are the following: creation,
Destruction.
destruction,
Periodical.
periodical,
Collision.
collision,
Up pressed.
up pressed,
Down pressed.
down pressed,
Left pressed.
left pressed,
Right pressed.
right pressed,
Button 1 pressed.
button 1 pressed,
Button 2 pressed.
button 2 pressed,
Button 3 pressed.
button 3 pressed,
Button 4 pressed.
button 4 pressed,
Button 5 pressed.
button 5 pressed. Now, the next set of options are all released or held. So,
Up released.
up released,
Down released.
down,
Left released.
left,
Right released.
and then button,
Button 1 released. Button 2 released. Button 3
3,
released. Button 4
4,
released. Button 5
5.
released.
Then we have the held.
Upheld.
Upheld,
Down held. Left held.
left,
Right held.
right. Button 1 held,
Button 1 held. Button 2 held.
2,
Button 3
3,
held. Button 4
4,
held. Button 5
done.
held.
And our final event is
Audio finished.
audio finished. Now, you can also use home,
Periodical.
oops,
Destruction. Creation.
to go back to the top. You can even use page up and down to go through the list. Now, this next press of tab,
Set global variable in status menu to 1 not selected.
I'm in a project, so it already has object actions in the list. This is your actions list. So you have your events list, and you have the actions list that you have created. And anytime you make a new action, wherever you are, because I can
If global variable in stat set global wait for what play set end if
see there's an end if here. Now,
set local play current attack power at 1 volume.
now, if I was to go to create action, that next action that would be posted would be
Set local variable can scroll to 1.
right where that is. And that option right there would be pushed down 1. So it's really nice. You can go to where you want in an action list and basically put an action where you want without having to move it. Excuse me. Let me grab a drink really quick. Right. You can put an action where you want it. Now, so, creation of actions.
Add action.
Add action. Now, I'm going to go in here.
Apply to colon. Grouping. Self-checked.
Okay, so here there is a radio button, or well, yeah, it would be a radio button. Check. So if it's applying to self, that means it's applying to the current object that you are wanting to add the action to. Okay.
Other colon. Checked.
If we said other, that means that we would then have to tab once
Blank.
and type in the object's name that we want the action that we're currently putting in
Other colon.
to be used on. And then we have looped,
Loop object checked.
and that is something we'll get into in another video, because there's a bit more of needing to understand loop objects and things like that before we get into that kind of thing. And I don't mean looped audio, I mean loop object itself. Now, if you are in collision, there will be another radio button check here that says on collision. Well, it just says collision, but what happens is it's for the on collision of if the player, say, is colliding with something, then the action being used with the collision radio button check will trigger or happen.
Self-checked.
So we'll put it back on self. If I shift tab,
Set X collapsed.
I'm in this big list of predefined actions. There are being more added as time goes on. But I mean, this is a pretty extensive list already. We have set X,
Set Y.
Y,
Set Z.
Z,
Add X.
add X, Y, and Z,
Add Z. Subtract X.
subtract those,
Create object.
create object,
Destroy self.
destroy self, Now, remember when I said, okay, we can use this as an example. Remember when I said you have the radio button check of other, so you can type in the object that you want the adject, the action that you're currently wanting to put in to take place on. So, if we chose other here, since we have destroy object or
Create destroy self.
if we
Apply to colon, grouping. Self checked. Other colon, checked.
choose other
Blank.
and type in a name, an object name here. So
Destroy self collapse.
instead of
Apply to colon, self checked. Destroy.
instead of destroying the object that I'm working on, this object doing the actions will destroy the object that I told it to destroy, since we chose other and I typed in the object's name. Alright, moving on.
Set TTS channel.
Set TTS channel. That is so you can type in a message like hello world and then tab, and it'll say TTS channel. You can, as far as I understand, you can have an unlimited number of channels, but you can say put that in channel 1 and then hit submit, and then our next action would most likely be used in conjunction with right after this action.
Play TTS channel.
Play TTS channel. You would just type in that same TTS channel that you put in after typing in the message of hello world. So if I say put hello world in on TTS channel 1 in the creation of an object, and I did, then I told it to play TTS channel 1. Same thing in the creation of the object, and then I did something in game to make the object create itself, because as you saw here,
Destroy create object.
Create object. We can create objects. You don't have to create an object on the creation of another object. Like if you use something like a map loader, you're going to want to create the player object. You're going to want to create the different objects pertaining to your area and any other things like walls and stuff like that. But what you can do is you can tell the system to if pressing down and you're at this location, Z location, create an object, and it will do that. So that's how that works.
Set play TTS channel.
We had it play hello world on channel 1. So if the object was created, then it would immediately speak with the TTS voice, the default TTS voice used on your computer. Hello world. And then it would keep itself there, because we haven't told it to
destroy itself
after playing the TTS message. We could do that if we wanted to. We could tell it to create itself on this particular object, and then in creation we could tell it to set the TTS message on the particular TTS channel, then play the TTS message on the particular channel, and then destroy itself. Done.
Set play save game.
Now, save game and load game are two just very simple actions. You don't really, well, I mean, you could put them in if statements. If colliding with bed, save game. If colliding with bed object, save game, end if. And essentially that would work. Now, if I'm wrong about that, Mr. Developer, please let me know. But that's what I essentially got from the way this was put.
Load game.
So there's your load game.
Set local variable.
Alright, now all of this is variable related. So you have set local variable.
Add local variable.
Add.
Subtract local variable. Multiply local variable. Divide local variable.
And divide.
Set global variable.
And now these are for globals. Set.
Add global variable. Subtract global variable. Multiply global variable. Divide global variable.
There's a spelling mistake there, I believe. So if you would make a note of that as well. It's saying global instead of global. Then, now, we have these.
Set random local variable.
Random. Hey, I'm actually using that in a couple of projects. They're quite fun because you can tell it to randomly set a number between 10 and or 0 and 50, and then choose one of those numbers. And if a number is something, play this particular audio or do this, if you will. You can do again, this is all the same thing. So set.
Add random local variable.
Add.
Subtract random local variable.
Subtract.
Multiply random local variable. Divide random local variable.
Divide. And those are all for local variables. But now we have the same exact thing except for global variables.
Set random global variable. Add random global variable. Subtract random global variable. Multiply random global variable. Divide random global variable.
Yeah, lots of diversity here. Lots of choices to use. This program is very, very well put together, and I'm not even done, you know. And so then
play audio.
Play audio. Kind of just like play play TTS channel. It will, on creation, if you say play audio, it will play the audio you've chosen. You put an audio name, and then you can either, if you know what the actual directory is, you can type it in yourself, or you can browse and find the file, put it in there, and it will play that particular audio on the creation of the event if that's where you've put it.
Stop audio.
Stop audio does what it says. It stops the audio from playing. So if you have stop audio at the beginning of your actions list of any of your up, down, left, and right keys, anytime you press the key, if it's, say, a sound, it's going to stop the audio and restart it once you've pressed the down arrow, or it'll play another audio if you have, if local variable selection equals 0, play this, and if local variable selection equals 1, play this, and if. But then you would, of course, you need to set the selection if local variable selection is less than 0, set local variable selection to 6, and so on and so forth. Now that, since I said that, that is for using up arrow to go up through your items. So you would also have, before the if local variable selection equals 0, you would have an add local variable selection by 1, and so on and so forth. So we'll go to the next.
Load audio.
Load audio. That is, I remember what I was talking about with the map loader. Or anything you use as what is called an init object, which is like the initial object you're going to use when starting the game. Whether it's a main menu object, whether it's a main menu loader object, whether it's the player object, whether it's a map 1 loader, it doesn't matter what it is. When you use that object as the initial object when game is started, on the creation of that object, you need to put in the load audio here.
Load audio.
Right here. You need to load any audio pertaining to that map. Now, you can load certain audio, and then on creation of another object, you can tell it to, either unload some of the audio that you've loaded on the initial object, and then load in some more audio, because you can do that. But if you want sounds to play when starting your game, you have to load your audio in your initial object when starting a game.
Unload audio.
And there it is, what I had just said. Unload audio. You're going to use this to unload audio so that the audio isn't in memory all the time. It will be unloaded and not be usable again until you reload it.
Unload all audio.
This basically does everything. It just unloads everything that's loaded, or everything that is loaded at the time. You tell it to unload all audio, and it will unload everything that is there.
Clear all objects.
Clear all objects. That is deleting all objects. And what that does is, say you have a main menu in your game, and you've pressed button 1 on new game. Well, if you've done that, you're going to want the game to load the map, the first map, or whatever you've done with it. So, what you're going to want to do is somewhere after pressing button 1, whether it's the audio finished of the button 1 sound that it makes, or maybe on button 1 press event itself, you can tell it to delete all objects, and then you would either need to tell it to create a map 1 loader object or what have you, because that means that the menu is going to stop, everything's going away, and the map 1 needs to load, so you need to create the map 1 loader after deleting all other objects.
Wait.
Wait is like waiting a specific time. You can tell it to wait, a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5, 10, 30 seconds before doing something. Before playing a particular piece of audio, or before making a certain string of actions happen. It's pretty, again, it's very diverse. It's you can use this in a lot of situations.
Condition begin.
Condition begin. This is your if statement. This is the beginning of all beginnings. This is where everything stems from. If this, then create this, or destroy this, or play this. You can have multiple if statements, one after the other. If this, then, if this, then, if this, do this, do that, end if, end if, end if. You have to have as many end ifs as you do if statements. If you don't, it's going to, things are not going to work as you would expect them to. Because you can say, if this, do that, play this, do that, if this, do that, end if this, do this, end if, end if, end if. Maybe not the last end if, because you already had put an end if in the middle of the project. But what I'm saying is if you have an if statement and then some actions underneath it, and another if statement inside of the first if statement, you're going to need to close the second if and the first if with two end ifs. So second if, end if, first if, end if at the bottom. And or excuse me, for things to work out properly. It took me a long time to learn that, and I still mess up sometimes. But it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Condition end.
And there it is. Condition end. End if. You're going to use this a lot. If here's a joke. If using if statements, do this action. End if. Use the end if statement. There's an inside joke about GDE or any programming point.
Pause audio.
Pause audio. Now this, instead of stopping audio, because when you stop audio and you play audio, if you stop audio, then it's going to play it from the beginning. It's going to play the audio from the beginning of the audio file. But the pause audio will pause the audio exactly where it's at when you've told it to pause it. And then your
resume audio
will pick it back up from where it was paused. So, play audio, stop audio. Play audio plays the audio from the beginning. Stop audio stops it and resets it so it plays from beginning when you play it again. Pause audio pauses the audio right where it's set. So say the audio has been playing for 2.5 seconds. It will pause at that point. And then resuming audio will start at the 2.5 seconds again.
Set TTS word rate.
Set TTS word rate. This allows you to set how fast you want your TTS speed to be, your default voice that is being used by SAPI to be. The highest number it can use is 300, I believe. And the
set TTS volume.
Same thing. Highest number I believe is 300, if I'm not mistaken. These are really nice because if you want TTS messages in your game, you're not using the default speech rate or speech volume. You can change that. And you'd mostly want to do that in the map 1 loader, say, or you want to use the main menu example. in the creation event of the main menu where you've loaded audio and created other objects, you can you're gonna want to say set TTS rate or set TTS word rate and set TTS volume, so that when the game starts, whichever init object is being used, it will create the init object when loading the game, because that's what init is for. It creates its own object that it's being used on, and then it will load all the audio, create all the other objects, and set the TTS word rate and speech rate, so that when you use TTS, it's not going to use the default speed and or volume. It'll use what you've set.
Increase audio volume.
This makes the audio volume louder. You can change it from 0 to 1, but you can change it from anywhere from 0.01 all the way to 0.99, and then 1 being the highest. So you have 100 paces that you can use. I've done this before in another project, and it works out. It works out pretty well.
Decrease audio volume.
Same thing, except for lowering the volume.
Set audio volume.
This sets it, so you can set it from 1 to 0.5, which is half the volume, or 1 to 0.2, which is near the bottom. Or you can set it from 1 to 0, and it'll just turn it off. Instead of stopping audio, so say you want the audio to essentially stop, but play once you set it back to 1. So what's going to happen is audio is going to continue to play at volume 0. You might not be able to hear it, but once you set it back to 1, it's still playing. It's never been told to stop or pause itself. So whatever you've done to set it to 0 and then set it back to 1, and the amount of seconds that you've told it to wait or do whatever and then set it back to 1, you've missed whatever was on the audio.
For loop begin.
Now, this is something I'm going to go into later, or maybe the developer will be going into this at some point. For loop begin and for loop end. Remember I said loop objects when creating your object. There was a creating your action. What do you want to put it on? Do you want to put it on the current object you're creating the action for? Do you want to put it on another object? Do you want to put it on a collision object? Or do you want to put it on a loop object? I'll go into very, very brief detail. Basically, for loop begin, that means that a loop has happened. So it's going to check a set of objects that you have set to be loop objects, and then it's going to do whatever it's told to do within this for loop begin and for loop end little loop there, if you will. There's another inside joke. And it will only perform the actions on an object that has the loop, that has something to do with the loop section of the code. Again, I or the developer will go into that more detail later on. Because I don't exactly quite understand it as much as I would like to, but it is there. It is there for programmers. I'm sure you know what this is.
For loop end.
And there it is, for loop end. That's now, to put it in short terms, for loop end is like a big if statement. For loop end is like a big end statement. It's only for specific actions and specific objects that it's being told to use on.
Increase audio pitch.
Okay, these are fun. I haven't really messed with these, but increase and decrease audio pitch. You can also
Set audio pitch.
set the audio pitch, so you can make the audio pitch sound higher an octave or lower an octave, or you can set it from where it is to, I don't know, an octave higher. I don't exactly know the whole number things because I haven't really messed with it quite yet. But I assume it's kind of like the volume.
Play positional audio.
Play positional audio. Now this is something you're going to want to use a lot if you're doing games that require your audio to be moved around the player. That's another thing. If you have a player object in creation of the player, you're going to want to set another one of these actions, which I'm going to show you in a second. That is an essential point if you want the player to have the object's noise go around the soundscape as you move around. So
Play positional audio.
play positional audio means that if the audio source is on an object that is to your left and in front of you, then that means the audio is going to play in that position. It's going to play to your left and in front of you, or directly behind you, or to your right and behind you.
Set roll-off factor.
Set roll-off
Set
factor
reference
and
distance.
set reference distance. I don't exactly know too much about those yet either. Those are two other things that I'll need to come back on, but essentially what happens is it kind of, with the where the audio is placed, when you move away from it, it will either make the audio louder and keep the audio going a longer, it'll get softer in volume slower when you walk away from it. If you set it to a certain number, it could get faster when walking away from it. So it's kind of like you ran away from it instead of walked away from it. Kind of works out. It kind of works out. Again, I don't know too much about it because I haven't really used it all that much. But
Set listener. Stop TT. Set listener.
set listener, set listener, set listener, set listener, guys. This is the action you want to use on your player object. Or maybe you have a stationary object and you've created a Monopoly game or something, and you want excuse me, you want the sound to move around the stationary object in the center of the board. You can set the stationary object as the listener, which essentially puts ears on the object, and any sound that it is moving around it, you will hear that as it will pan around you. Now it's not particularly binaural audio, unfortunately, but this is OpenAL, so OpenAL, they may have a binaural code set that you could use, which I think would be nice. I would love that, to actually have true binaural audio in a game that I'm creating. Man, that would be great. That would be fantastic. Wow, I would love it. But setting your listener is very important in making an audio game. Also, when setting your listener, any sounds that you want to pan around you, any sounds that you want to pan around when moving the player or whatever, they must be in mono. If they're in stereo, they're not. It's not going to work because it can't use. It cannot use spatial audio 0.01 to move the audio around you, because it's using two channels, so it can't move the two channels in the same. Now it could excuse me, my goodness, it could, if you have the right algorithms. Now, because there are some binaural audio systems that can move stereo fields around. I've seen it, which is really odd. I don't know why. I don't even know why you would want that to happen, because you're really messing with the the way the stereo field is supposed to behave when trying to mess with stereo in a binaural aspect, or even in a 3D aspect. But mono is the point here. You need to make your object, your sound, not your object, your sound, as a mono sound, one stereo, so that the listener system can move that sound around. Anyway.
Stop TTS channel.
Stop TTS channel. Now, this is something that was recently put in. Because I and someone else, or a couple of other people, have requested it, because we wanted the TTS to stop if doing something. So if, there's your if statement. If doing this, do this, stop TTS. If TTS is playing on a particular channel. And it works. It definitely works. I messed around with it in my demo project that I was working on. But that is the list of all the actions. Finally. Now, so you have add action.
Delete action.
Delete action does exactly what it says. Any action that you're focused on in your actions list. Now, you can either press delete on the keyboard, or you can tab to the delete action button.
Move action up.
Move action up. Now, if you've placed your action, too far down or too far up, you can do exactly what these say. Each time you press move action down or move action up, it will move the action up or down one space. So it'll move it to the slot that was above the slot that you're currently focused on. Same thing with going down. It'll move it to the next slot down from the one that you're focused on. Now, once you do move it to the next slot up or down, it'll still stay focused on that current action. It will have just switched the two actions around, the bottom one going above the current action you're on, or the top one going below the current, or the next action down going to being above the current action you're on, and the next action up going to being below the current action you're on.
Move action down. Add comment.
Add comment. A lot of people do this in programming. You can add comments in your code. You can say, okay, this code is for this, and you can do this on each event in the event list. You can add comments. And then, now here's something which is really nice.
GDE script.
GDE script. This is where you can actually see the code. Now, if I go in here...
Multi-line. Selected set.
So, Now I'm in a edit box, a multi-line edit box. So all the actions that I was looking at earlier, not the predefined ones, but the ones that I had set in my actions list, in the tab after events list. So
Set quote in status menu quote quote 1 quote.
now I have my punctuation turned on so that I can use quotes, or I hear punctuation. So I can see this now in GDE format.
SETGV space quote capital IN space capital STATUS space capital MENU quote space quote 1 quote carriage return.
Now what that said is set GV global variable, then in quotes in status menu, meaning the global variable called in status menu, then the quote after to close it, space, quote, 1 quote, meaning set status menu, global variable status menu to 1. Then
If quote G quote in status menu quote equals quote C quote 1 quote.
if global variable in status menu equals 1,
Equals
so
set
let-
carriage return IF space quote capital G quote space
so if space quote capital G quote meaning global variable
quote
space quote
capital I
variable name
N cap TATU space cap ENU quote
quote
space
space
quote
quote
equals
double equals for equals
quote
quote
space quote
space quote
capital C
capital C meaning constantly. That means is the variable constantly at this point? Is it constantly being set to true? Is it constantly being set to 1 or 0?
quote
Quote
space
Space.
quote 1
quote
quote
1
carriage return
quote, and that's the end of that line. So see, you can see how if you were to write in code yourself, because you can type in this edit box. You can write the exact same thing. I'm going to submit this
GDE script
and go back.
delete
So-
add act set local variable can scroll to play wait set if global set global variable in status menu to 1
Okay, so see, the very top line of the GDE script was just that,
set global variable in status menu to 1
but it was written in the GDE code, so you can actually write your code.
if global variable in status menu equals 1 then
If global variable in status menu equals constant value 1, or sorry, constant variable 1, there it is. See, in in that you can read and or write your
add comment
code.
GDE script level 2 player stats 9 of
Now,
11
This, again, when I was saying at the beginning, this is your list of objects.
over menu choice focus 8 of 11 level 2 player stats 9 of 11 inventory 10 of 11 level 2 spellbook 11 of 11 level 2
And you can have folders of objects. You don't have to have them all in the same location. You can have folders within folders within folders within folders if you wanted. But now, since we're back at the objects list, I'm going to end my session here. And if the developer is putting my thing before his, then I'll let him continue on. And talk about what we've been doing together. Yes, we have been working on our own audio game together. So it's going to be great. So either wait for the next video from me or him, or keep listening to the next part. You'll enjoy it as well. Bye for now. From me, this is Sean Terry, signing off.